Strength builds equal a ton of physical damage, so I'm going to show you the top 5 best strength builds that you can use for the most previous patch of Elden Ring. Now, I haven't made a jump attack build in a very long time, so I figured with the DLC out and having been out for a while, I would go ahead and take another crack at it. But considering this is a strength build video, we are not going to have your average dexterity arcane bleed build. This time, we are going to be rocking 2 Beastman's heavy curve swords with Cragblade on each one. Cragblade is going to allow you to get a fantastic amount of stance and stamina damage to your target, allowing you to break stances incredibly fast, and with the really awesome jump attack moveset that curve swords have, you are going to be using multi-hit talismans, as well as talismans that are going to boost your damage after you engage in a critical strike. Considering we do use a lot of stamina for this build, we also will have the two-headed turtle talisman equipped just so we can go ahead and make sure we're jumping as fast as possible, getting those multi-hits off, and melting bosses and enemies very quickly in order to break stances with dual crag blade. Now, you also don't have to just use jump attacks for this build. The curve sword moveset is absolutely incredible. You could switch things up and use a charged R2 build with this, or just exercise a flurry of attacks with multi-hit talismans. Either way, you're going to have an absolute blast playing with this build and getting through the game with ease. So for this build, you're going to be using 2 Beastman's heavy curve swords with crag blade on both of them get an A scaling, which is really nice. You're also going to use whatever armor you would like to get over the 51 poise mark. However, I'm also using the Gravebird's Black Quill armor, which is going to give me extra jump attack damage, much like the Raptor's Black Feathers. For my talismans, I have the two-headed turtle talisman, the Rottenwing sword insignia, the Blade of Mercy, as well as the Claw talisman. Now for my flask, I'm using the Thorny Crack tier and the Stone Barb Crack tier, and when it comes to my buffs, I have Flame Grant Me Strength and Golden Vow. This is a level 171 build, shot on New Game +6. I have 60 Vigor, 19 Mind, 30 Endurance, 80 Strength, 20 Dexterity, 9 Intelligence, 25 Faith, and 7 Arcane. Now for our next build, we're going to be looking at a Great Sword build. However, I didn't want to use the typical Great Sword build with the Lion's Claw Ash of War or Cragblade on this weapon. Instead, I went with a mix of Giant Hunt and the Deflecting Hard tier in order to play around heavy charged R2, deflections and guard counters, and while doing so, we are going to be pulling off some incredible damage. Now, the way that I like to play this build is I'll go in and use the Giant Hunt Ash of War to get our enemies staggered or tossed up into the air, and then as they're getting back up, you can charge up a heavy charged R2 and pull off a crazy amount of damage with those 2 skills combined. However, once they get up, you can block, and if you block correctly, you can engage that Deflecting Hard tier and stack that with the Curve Sword Talisman to then pull off an incredibly powerful guard counter. Now, the Greatsword is going to have standard and pierce damage, and allowing Giant Hunt to crush through enemies while also having that pierce damage is really going to slice through a lot of bosses because the majority of bosses are weak to that pierce damage. We are also going to be boosting our stamina recovery as this is a massive weapon, and once we get to the stats, equipment, and talismans we're using, you're going to see exactly how this build is going to be pulled together. But overall, I thought it did a really good job of battling not only DLC bosses and enemies, but base game as well. So for this build, we're going to be using the Heavy Greatsword with Giant Hunt. We're also going to be using pieces of the Rakshasa armor set, as well as whatever other armor set you would like. I am using the Two-Headed Turtle Talisman, the Curved Sword Talisman, the Axe Talisman, and the Two-Handed Sword Talisman. For my flask, I'm using the Spike Crack tier and the Deflecting Hard tier. And just to clarify something, if you can use the entire Rakshasa armor set without being in a heavy load, definitely do that for the total of 8% more damage, but I couldn't do that because I didn't want to use the Great Jar's Arsenal in this build, so that is the reason that we have it set up this way. Now, when it comes to our stats and our buffs, we're using Flame Grant Me Strength and Golden Vow. I'm going to have 60 Vigor, 19 Mind, 30 Endurance, 80 Strength, 20 Dexterity, 9 Intelligence, 25 Faith, and 7 Arcane. This is level 171 build on New Game +6. Now, next up, we're going to be looking at one of my favorite weapons that came to us in the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC. We are going to be using the Sword Lance with Cragblade, and this is also going to be a Deflecting Hard tier build. However, with this Deflecting Hard tier build, not only are you going to be getting damage from the Spear Talisman, but you're also going to be stacking that with the Curved Sword Talisman, as well as the Deflecting Hard tier, and when you hit with this particular guard counter at just the right moment, you are going to be able to take massive chunks of health off of every enemy in this game. The Sword Lance is a heavy thrusting sword. It has phenomenal scaling with strength at A, and it's also going to have really phenomenal pierce damage. This is an incredibly beginner-friendly build as well. The only thing you need to do is time those guard counters correctly, and you will have no problem with any boss in this game. And real quick, if you're enjoying the content, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell notification so you can know when new videos are coming out. We have a ton of games coming out in 2025 that you're definitely not going to want to miss, and also Elden Ring Night Reign. So without further ado, let's jump right back into the video. Now, if you decide that you don't want to do a deflecting hard tier build, or you just don't have it yet, you can very easily make this a charged heavy R2 build with the Cragblade Ash of War in order to make things very, very easy for you. And as you can see from the video right now, those attacks are going to do a ton of damage as well. Okay, so for this build, you're going to be using the Heavy Sword Lance with Cragblade on it, as well as a dagger with Golden Vow for a buff. I'm using the Clawmark Seal for Flame Grant Me Strength. I have the Rakshasa armor set. For my talismans, I have the Spear Talisman for those counterattacks with pierce weapons. I also have the Two-Headed Turtle Talisman, the Curved Sword Talisman for our guard counters, and the Two-Handed Sword Talisman. I'm also going to be using the Deflecting Hard tier, as well as the Blood-Sucking Crack tier. And for my stats, I have 60 Vigor, 18 Mind, 30 Endurance, 70 Strength, 18 Dexterity, 7 Intelligence, 15 Faith, and 11 Arcane. Now, in my opinion, I don't think any strength tier list is complete without adding the Star Fist. These are a phenomenal fist weapon, allowing you to get a crazy amount of stance and stamina damage, also allowing you to put together a variety of different builds. So there's not just one certain playstyle with this weapon, but I decided to go with the straight strength build, as well as using Endure for our Ash of War in order to tank through hits and use a ton of heavy charged R2s, which for this weapon come out incredibly fast in order to hack down enemies' health, providing a very easy style of play. Now, you can use a successive attack build here. You can use a bleed build if you want to put a ton into Arcane, or if you want to go occult, you can just get a ridiculous amount of physical damage out. However, as I stated, I just went straight up strength, and I've had a very fun time playing with this build. Now, there is one massive drawback to this weapon, and as you're seeing on the screen, when you're fighting something like a Falling Star Beast that moves around a ton and has a little bit of a wonky hitbox, being close is the only way to use these weapons. You have absolutely zero range when equipping the Star Fist, so you are going to want to be careful that you don't get too far away from your boss or enemy you're fighting, because that could spell absolute disaster for you. Now, for this build, you're going to want to use the Heavy Star Fist with Endure, just so you can tank through all of those hits. You're also going to be using whatever armor set you would like to get you over 51 poise. I currently have 45 poise, but it's because I put on the White Mask for that extra damage on blood loss. We're also using the Two-Headed Turtle Talisman, the Lord of Blood's Exaltation, as well as the Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman. For our flask, we're using the Spike Crack tier and the Stone Barb Crack tier. And for your buffs, you're going to be using Flame Grant Me Strength and Golden Vow. This is once again the same stat spread as the previous build at level 171. Vigor is 60, Mind is 19, Endurance is 30, Strength is 80, Dexterity is 20, Intelligence is 9, Faith is 25, and Arcane is 7. Now, for our last build here, we're going to be focusing on the Great Sword of Solitude. This is a really good weapon that came to us from Shadow of the Erdtree, and it has a really nice mobility to it, allowing your Ash of War to be a two-part slash that sends a almost air slash-like slash towards the enemy, and then you have a follow-up slash with the physical attack of the weapon. You can pour out a ton of damage with this weapon very quickly, and it is one of the only great swords that gives you a really nice amount of mobility. And for that reason, it almost doesn't feel like a strength build, but rather a dexterity build where your mobility comes with ease. Now, you can do a ton of different things with this weapon. You can stack it for heavy charged R2s, you can go Shard of Alexander and really pump damage into the Ash of War, or you can do a combination of both, as I've done here, allowing you to spike your physical damage and your Ash of War damage in order to get the most benefit out of this weapon. Now, one thing we have done for this build, in order to counteract the Blood-Sucking Crack here, which we're using to get a 20% increased damage boost, we're also going to be using a Crimson Sapping tier, which is going to give us HP anytime we attack our target. Now, that won't completely negate the Blood-Sucking Crack tier, but it is going to help out, allowing you not to take your health off as fast. So for this build, you're going to use the Great Sword of Solitude, also a dagger for Golden Vow. You can use the Clawmark Seal to cast Flame Grant Me Strength. I'm using the Rakshasa armor set for extra damage. I'm using the Shard of Alexander, the Two-Headed Turtle Talisman, the Crimson Seed Talisman +1, and the Two-Handed Sword Talisman. For my flask, I'm using the Crimson Sap Zapping crack tier in order to negate the Blood Sucking crack tier. Then we're also using the Blood Sucking crack tier for that extra 20% damage. And when it comes to my buffs, as I said, Flame Grant Me Strength, we're a level 150 build. This is on New Game plus 5, and you're gonna have 60 Vigor, 18 Mind, 30 Endurance, 70 Strength, 18 Dexterity, 7 Intelligence, 15 Faith, and 11 Arcane. Hey guys, that is going to be it for the top 5 best strength builds, in my opinion, that you can use in Elden Ring right now. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe on your way out. I appreciate you guys a ton. Until next time, stay safe, enjoy the game, and I'll see you in the next one.